The lunar landings were more than likely fabricated, faked.
I affirm that we didn't go to the moon, and I would bet my life on it.
We did not land men on the moon.
The moon landing has been a subject of controversy since 1969. More than 50 years later, several experts and renowned figures like Elon Musk have made quite some interesting comments. Why is the moon landing still heavily debated to this day? What is Elon Musk's position on whether or not the government lied to us? Join us on today's episode as we explore why Elon Musk thinks people don't realize the mistake of the moon landing. For as long as we can remember, humanity has always been interested in exploring the vast world of space beyond our planet. And what better place to start than on the moon? Plans to step foot on the moon started way back in 1960. Initially, the goal was to send a three-man team to orbit the moon, not land on it. It was during the famous speech of then-President John Kennedy in 1962 that the dream of landing a man on the moon before 1970 was crystallized in the heart of America. And Kennedy's dream did come to pass when the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, took his first steps in 1969. But accomplishing this vision came with a lot of labor and sacrifices. The government had to recruit the brightest minds and experts to work on this project, and a ton of financial resources were poured into it. But even so, the first mission wasn't even close to success. The Apollo 1 mission was the first attempt by NASA to visit the moon with astronauts. It featured the astronauts Virgil Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Chaffee. Sadly, these men lost their lives when a fire broke out in the spacecraft's command module, destroying everything. The mission failed. NASA had to conduct a series of investigations into the incident and extensively reworked the command module. They finally decided it would be best to add another launch vehicle that would carry the main payload, the lunar module. Subsequent missions, from Apollo 4 to 9, were about testing the newly improved spacecraft and adding more features. No missions were designated Apollo 2 or 3. This is because these early missions seemed more like repetition of Apollo 1, but didn't feature any crew on board. And so, NASA decided to leave them out of the numbering. Apollo 10 was a major milestone in this journey. It was the fourth human spaceflight mission in the Apollo program, and this time, the astronauts managed to circle the moon and back successfully without any issues. The Apollo 10 mission set the stage for Apollo 11. The only difference is that the astronauts didn't land on the moon. By this time, scientists had studied and learned so much about the moon. This is why they could predict what the moon's surface and weather conditions would feel like. And they replicated these details and scenarios to train astronauts before sending them to the moon. Telescopes, space probes, and satellites had already given us a wealth of knowledge on the moon. But all this was nothing compared to landing on the moon and retrieving samples from it. These trial Apollo missions helped NASA know what it would take to transport men to the moon and back. And so, when the two men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin, stepped foot on the moon, it marked a phenomenal moment in history that was celebrated by the entire world. Apollo 11's huge success inspired NASA to launch subsequent missions to the moon, and it also inspired other world leaders to make their own moon landing attempts. The photos and videos of these astronauts on the Apollo missions have long since gone viral and never get old. However, since the first mission, certain unexplained phenomena and conspiracy theories have been springing up, plus several leaked information from whistleblowers. One of these many conspiracies is that the moon landing was staged and never happened. As obscure as this might sound, there's a lot of evidence backing this. For one, if you observe most NASA clips featuring astronauts on the moon, you'll find that there are no stars in the sky. You'd agree that stars are inseparable from outer space. You'd find them in nearly all NASA space probes and telescope images. But for some reason, we don't see stars in Apollo mission photos and videos. If we can see stars down here from Earth, shouldn't these stars be even more visible from up there on the moon? However, NASA has debunked this claim with a reasonable explanation. According to NASA, stars seem absent from the lunar images because of the lighting conditions and the kind of camera used back then. Also, the light from the sun made the stars appear less bright and invisible. Another thing pointed out by conspiracy theorists is the lack of a blast crater on the moon to indicate where the Apollo craft landed. NASA easily debunked this, saying that the layer of dust covering the moon's surface absorbed the impact of the descending craft, so there was no visible crater. Over 50 years have passed since Armstrong and Aldrin first stepped foot on the moon, but still, their footprints are very much visible on the moon. Also, other evidence they kept on the moon landing site has been confirmed today. This, of course, strengthens Elon Musk's claim that the United States government really did land on the moon, and that the people pushing conspiracy theories are making a mistake. 6 Apollo missions followed after Apollo 11. The official final Apollo mission was Apollo 17. However, some believe that this wasn't actually the last. There are rumors that NASA kept sending people on classified Apollo missions to the moon, up to Apollo 20. Some of these rumors even attest that the agency may have encountered alien life on the moon. While NASA has denied these claims, it doesn't help with the moonwalking hoax theory. Apollo 17, the last Apollo mission, was in 1972. Since then, NASA hasn't gone on another mission to the moon, and it makes you wonder why. It's been over 5 decades since the moon landing, and several changes have occurred on the moon landing site. For instance, the American flag planted on the moon has degraded greatly, even though it was made of special material to withstand the conditions of the moon. Also, the items that were left there on the moon by the first astronauts have been covered by fine moon dust. This concealing has made it difficult for the actual moon landing site to be identified when viewing the moon through telescopes or space probes. And so, given these state of events, it would only be natural for NASA to launch another Apollo mission, replace these items with new ones, or conduct further studies on the moon. This has led conspiracy theorists to ask the question, why does the agency now find it difficult to land on the moon? Certainly, we've grown much more advanced in technology today than 1960s, so NASA should have what it takes to land as many people as possible. So why not? Well, NASA experts have explained that it's for this same reason the agency isn't planning any lunar missions. Technology is now so good that we can observe the moon perfectly with our space probes and telescopes like James Webb. So why waste millions of dollars to send people to the moon? Scientists at NASA and other space agencies are more concerned with learning about other planets and parts of our cosmos, and this is where the resources are being poured into. Moreover, the Apollo missions had brought in considerable amount of data, and it's safe to say that scientists have learned all they needed to know about the moon from the samples and data that Neil Armstrong and his colleagues brought back. For instance, the moon rocks brought back from the Apollo 11 were useful in providing more insight into the moon's composition. In fact, they were so valuable that they were sold for $50,000 per gram on the black market. Another obvious reason the moonwalk can't be a hoax is that the event was broadcast live. Not only America, but other nations also paid keen attention to the broadcast. Technology at that time wasn't as sophisticated as now, so the Apollo camera could only produce video in monochrome SSTV format at 10 frames per second. These black and white video recordings were transmitted back to the NASA base, but sending them to broadcasting networks was impossible. First, the recording format wasn't compatible, and second, the videos were of very poor quality. NASA had to enhance the videos and pictures from the Apollo mission before releasing them to the public. However, radio transmissions were broadcast almost immediately, thanks to a good number of radio telescopes covering the event. Some of these telescopes include the Goldstone Tracking Station in California, the Honeysuckle Creek Tracking Station, and the Parkes Observatory in Australia. And just the way these broadcast signals were picked by radio telescopes in the US, they were picked by similar equipment in other nations of the world. This is why Elon Musk believes the Russians closely monitored and tracked the Apollo moon landing. They were curious, just like the rest of the world. Elon Musk also pointed out that the Russians even went as far as congratulating the United States government on the remarkable feat, so there's no way it was a hoax. And just so you know, since the last Apollo mission in 1972, other nations have launched their own lunar missions. Countries like China, Japan, and Russia have traveled to the moon and back. And as we said earlier, evidence of the first moon landing is still there on the moon, like the US flag and the plaque. If the first mission were a hoax, then these other world nations that successfully landed astronauts on the moon would have quickly come out to say so. Perhaps they would have confessed that there was no flag on the moon, or there were no footprints. But none of these nations have come out to say so, further proving the reality of this event. This is one point that Elon Musk stressed during an interview when he was asked what he thought about the 1969 moon landing. In Elon Musk's opinion, the 1969 moon landing was very important and necessary for all of humanity, and there's no doubt that it did happen. Elon Musk believes the United States visited the moon multiple times, and that if it were all a hoax, the Russian government would have exposed it all long ago. You see, the United States and Russia have been rivals since the Cold War. In fact, the rivalry and race for supremacy continued into space exploration. In 1959, the Soviet space program attempted a moon landing with the Lunar 2 space rocket, only to miss the moon initially in January of that year. However, on September 14, 1959, it landed on the moon successfully. And so the Russians were the first to land a human-made craft on the moon. And it's very likely that this was what spurred the US to invest all of its resources in the Apollo missions. The US won the contest by being the first country to safely land a manned aircraft and walk on the moon. But some experts still don't believe that all this is enough proof. These people suspect a bigger political agenda may be at play. Ever since the United States' successful Apollo missions, the Soviet space program has successfully carried out about 23 missions to the moon, and no one, not even a whistleblower, has come out to accuse the US government or deny seeing the flags and plaque planted on the moon. Certainly, if there's any country that would want to expose a fake moon landing, it would be Russia. However, there have been many whistleblowers inside NASA over the years, and some of the leaked photos and documents from these sets of people can be quite convincing to the general public and cause strong arguments. For instance, there's the issue of the waving flag. There are no winds in the moon's atmosphere, but if you look closely, you will find that the flags these astronauts planted seem to be waving. But NASA has revealed that the flags seem to be waving because of the vibrations from the moon's interior and the way they were being handled or mounted. One of the strongest arguments conspiracy theorists have been used to push the moonwalking hoax theory is the shadows of the astronauts and the way they move. The shadows in the lunar images released by NASA do not lie parallel to each other or point in the same direction. Surely, if the sun's light reflected on the moon, the shadows should be pointing in one direction. These off-putting shadows have made some people suggest that the photos are fake and were taken in a studio or secret location with several different lighting sources. While this shadow mystery may seem very convincing to conspiracy theorists, it doesn't fully justify that these photos are fake. It could all boil down to the viewer's perspective. Also, the cameras used for the lunar missions were nothing like the modern cameras that can explicitly capture details in photo backgrounds. NASA had to work on these images to make them clearer and more appreciable for public viewing. So, there's a chance the faults have arisen from the cameras or the editors. Moreover, there's no way the photos were taken in studios because the kind of studio lighting available then would have made for a completely different-looking photo. But even if the photos are legit, there's controversy over the videos too. Experts have noticed that the physics seems to be different in different videos. In some videos, the astronauts can be seen walking slowly, but in others, they seem to be bouncing like one would do on a trampoline. To make matters worse, there was a time when NASA was caught trying to pass off some training photos as the real deal. You see, before NASA sent Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the moon, they trained them to use scientific equipment and cameras. And so they were trial sessions and simulations of taking pictures in a moon environment. It turns out that later on, in 2006, NASA lost some of the official recordings of the first moon landing, and some whistleblowers claim they tried to fill in the blanks with training clips. Some video experts with keen eyes could even spot that some videos differed from others released earlier. This one wrong move by NASA made many believe in the artificial moon theory. This theory holds that the moon is an artificial structure. Some extreme versions of the theory even postulate that the moon was planted by an alien race to monitor all of humanity. This theory, of course, doesn't really fit in because so far astronauts have recovered a lot of data and samples that have revealed the moon's composition, age, and mode of formation. In case you're wondering why there are so many conspiracy theories flying around about NASA's moonwalk, it's all thanks to We Never Went to the Moon, a book published in 1976 by Bill Kaysing. Due to its controversial topic, it was an instant hit. Most of the conspiracy theories we've discussed so far were first mentioned in this book. But the surprising fact is that this author is not a scientist, engineer, or expert in anything related to science. In fact, before this time, his books were solely focused on cooking and agriculture. But Bill Kaysing was very confident in his book and even defended it on national TV. A lot of Americans believed this man's story, mostly because the people didn't have much trust in the government at the time due to several political issues. But you see, while there may be many suspicious flaws and unconnected dots in NASA's lunar exploration missions, there's much substantial evidence that the moon landing did in fact happen. And just so you know, the world might yet witness an even greater moonwalk than the Apollo missions, as SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has made some quite shocking revelations. Elon Musk reveals that we will soon go to the moon again, but the mission will be much bigger this time than just walking on the moon or collecting samples. He added that his company, SpaceX, has a contract with the government to take astronauts to the moon. As we all know, Elon Musk believes so much in the possibility of life outside space, and SpaceX is solely devoted to making this dream come true. This is why the space agency is very much involved in exploring Mars and setting up a Martian base there that could accommodate humans. The SpaceX mission plans to set up this Martian base and transport humans gradually to Mars before some pandemic or otherworldly disaster destroys our planet. In case you're wondering how we'll get to Mars, SpaceX has some of the world's most advanced rockets and spacecraft, and transportation of humans won't even be a problem when the time comes. However, during a recent podcast, Elon Musk shared that SpaceX will first send astronauts to the moon before sending humans to Mars. He explained that SpaceX is working on a gigantic super heavy-lift starship compared to all the former models. This starship can transport 100 tons of payload effectively and could even be used to build a moon base. In Elon Musk's words, we could go way beyond what was done with the Apollo program, where they had a small lander. Elon Musk believes that the first successful Apollo mission was an anomaly, an event in human history that happened much quicker than it should have. He commented that the technology and skill the United States deployed to make that mission successful was way ahead of its time. It should have been impossible to have humans walking on the moon as early as 1969, but the United States government decided it needed to happen, so they did everything possible to ensure it did. According to Elon Musk, such an event is like reaching into the future and bringing technology to the present. It is not the natural pace of technology development. This time, Elon Musk believes the lunar mission should be a big one, and thankfully, his company would be the one to see it through. His final words during the recent podcast were, "I think we should build a city on the moon and on Mars." Thank you for watching another episode of Voyager. While you are still here, click on the video on your screen to see more mind-blowing videos like this one.